restless when the track hits my soul. Restless to the point I lose control. I get so restless. Feel that body heat.
Hey, this is Jonny Miller from SubBass in London, and yeah, today we're going to have a little look at auto filter. I'm going to use it to add a little bit of movement and a little bit of character to some drum sounds. One thing I think is really important in your productions generally is when you have static drum sounds that in some way you can get them to move, to have a little bit of energy and a little bit of life. Now we can use things like velocity and groove to bring these feelings of life and expression in. But I'm going to show you how you can use auto filter as well to get some really nice movement on some hi-hats. So here's what I've got. I'm just working on like a soulful kind of percussive house track. Just using some 707, some 808 and some 909 sounds. These are my hats. And they've got a little bit of groove on them and I like the feel of them, but at the moment it just feels like they're kind of sticking out a bit too much. And I want to sit them in and get them to move a little bit. So I'm going to go to the browser, just drag in auto filter. And first thing I'm going to do is just filter them down a little bit with the low pass filter, the default filter when you load auto filter. And now I'm just going to start using some of these functions, the LFO, which is going to give me a stereo filtering effect, left, right. So we're going to get almost like a panning effect as I bring up the LFO amount. Especially if I speed up the LFO rate. And that's fine, but that's just a little bit kind of too much panning for me. So I want to keep this a little bit more centered. I'm going to use the phase function here. And if I bring that down to 0, we essentially bring the two filters that are going on here, the left and right modulating filters, brings them together, puts them central, gives me essentially a mono effect. I'm also quickly here going to switch the LFO rate into beats mode and just take it up to 3/16 or 1/4 maybe. I can change that around later on, find a nice little pattern that I like. And now you can hear that as well as kind of sitting the hi-hats into the mix a little bit, we've got this nice little bit of kind of movement on there. And that's fine too. I can play around with the groove almost of this hi-hat pattern now using offset. And as I move the offset function, listen to how the filtered hi-hats seem to shift around within the groove. And I can find a little groove and a little placement for that really works. I quite like it there actually. So those hats are really kind of skipping around and they feel like they're bouncing around inside the beat. Rather than, again, if I turn auto filter off, kind of just static. Now if the filter effect is a little bit too much, we could always just bring that filter frequency back up again. Or if you wanted to heighten the filter effect, we could maybe add some Q. And that just boosts the level of the frequency at the cutoff point, gives us more of a kind of filtered effect, heightens the sound of the filter. But I kind of keep that fairly low when I'm using the device. I don't want to hear too much filter. There we go. Okay, lastly, I'm going to use a function that I don't see used very much actually in my years teaching and tutoring Ableton. I don't see many people use this, the quantized beat function on auto filter. And this essentially locks the modulation that we get from auto filter, locks it to a beat grid. So if I switch that on, maybe take the quantized beat button down to number 1. I'll kind of accentuate this a bit so you can really hear it. There we go. If I turn it on and off, you'll really hear the difference. So that's without the quantized beat, and we can really hear the the auto filter LFO at work there. But with quantized beat, it takes that modulation and it almost puts it into steps. And the different quantized beat settings will give us different patterns. That's quite nice. Again, that's sitting really nice alongside my 707 drums and my 808 kick. Let's try a different offset. You can find again a combination of these settings that really works. Okay, cool. So just to show you that technique on another ingredient, I've just used it there on hi-hats on a drum part, but if I go to the strings part here, I've also just loaded auto filter and done a couple of the same things, the same kind of settings, used the quantized beat, but I've kept the LFO behavior a little bit more random this time. I've used one of the noise shapes that you have here in this little drop menu, the LFO shape. So I've used the noise shape here, and so it isn't synced to any tempo essentially, but the auto beat is. So let's put the strings on. That's let me solo this quickly. There we go. And what we get is this nice kind of almost slightly randomized pattern, but it's still sitting nicely with my drums because of the auto beat function that's switched on. But the type of filtering I'm getting feels a little bit randomized because of the noise shape that I've used. So hopefully there you've picked up a couple of little tips on how to use auto filter for your drums to add a little bit of movement into your sounds in your tracks. And stay close to SubBass for more little Ableton tips from myself. Take care, peace.
I get so restless when the track hits my soul. Restless to the point I lose control. I get so restless. Feel that body heat.